That's all. I
Okay,
didn't see him, but his name was up.
okay. Well, our presenter for today, for those of you that don't know him, I will not introduce him. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm gonna be talking about some production numbers that were on the Model A's. How many of you happen to be at Gettysburg and attend this? Wow. Well, I'm gonna bore you again for a second time.
Catch it all the first time around.
So,
We'll learn more.
I got started doing this probably over 20 years ago. And what piqued my interest was an article in the Model A News written by an Art Filyaw down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And he had found some of these numbers on cars and collected a few of them, and he put them in the Model A News. And I wasn't at the stage with my car yet to do anything with it, but I immediately went out and scraped some numbers, scraped some paint. I think it was 3 or 4 layers of paint that I scraped. And I found a number, 2 of which were in Art Filyaw's list. So I'm going to be talking about that. And that got me started because some guys were calling these production numbers, but I wasn't convinced they were production numbers. I thought they might have been something else. But now I'm convinced they're production numbers. They're production numbers by assembly plant. Are stamped into a good number, but not all of the Model A's. And I'm going to show you what they look like. I'm going to talk a little bit about them. And I'm going to hopefully try and maybe do some articles for the Model A News and the Restorer. I did some back in 1997 for the Model A News, and I did an article for the Restorer in 2001. What they consist of is anywhere from 1 to 5 letters that generally designates the assembly plant where the vehicle was assembled.
Do I change to the next screen or
Yeah, you can go to the next screen.
this one?
Yep. Ford had 32 assembly plants in the United States. And that seems like a lot by today's standards. But the thinking back in the day was we want to assemble the cars close to where they're being sold. We'll get the parts to the assembly plant. And then where they're assembled, they'll be sold. And each of these assembly plants had a geographic area that they provided cars to dealers for sale to the public. This is kind of a map here. There's also a larger one here that I got put together several years ago. This is the Rouge plant, which was the headquarters for Ford Motor Company. And all of these outlying map pins are the assembly plants. 32 of them. According to a book that was written by, it's called they categorize the assembly plants by their kind of metal stamping capabilities. The lowest assembly plant was called a minor plant. It didn't have any metal stamping capabilities. And those plants could only accept completed bodies from a body manufacturer or one of the higher level plants. We think of Murray, Briggs, Budd as being the major body manufacturers. There were a lot more companies who just bought Model A chassis and then they put their own body style in it. I think Jeanette Scott has what she calls a meat wagon. They delivered meat in it, so the back end of it was set up just to hang meat and deliver meat. Harvey, your fire truck, is on a AA chassis, but it was sent to a company where they put the rest of the fire equipment on there.
Martin Perry.
Martin Perry made some, and these are kind of smaller ones, but the big three are Briggs, Murray.
Hey, Dave. The 32 plants, out of the 32 plants, did they all pretty much made the same cars, 2-doors, 4-doors, roadsters?
They- Most of them made every body style that was in the Ford line, yes. As opposed to today, like the Rouge plant today, they only make the F-150 single cab and quad cab. So they just concentrate on the smaller trucks. Kevin?
What was the closest thing? Which would be the closest assembly?
The closest one was probably in Chester, Pennsylvania. But most of the cars that are in the club, and when I first started collecting them, I was surprised, most of the cars in our car club came out of Norfolk, Virginia. I think Don's car came out of Norfolk. There were several other cars that came out of Norfolk, Virginia. Like I said, each assembly plant had a geographic area that they provided cars to dealers for sale to the public. Stop and think, where's Norfolk located? It's on the water. Where's Baltimore located? It's on the water. So they could ship the cars via shipping. Ford moved 4 of the plants during the Model A production to make those plants closer to water. 2 of them are in California. The first one was San Francisco, and then they moved it to Richmond, California. Los Angeles, and they moved it to Long Beach to make it closer to the water. On the East Coast, Kearney, New Jersey, and they moved it to Edgewater, New Jersey. And we just recently found out that the Buffalo, New York plant was moved from somewhere in Buffalo to somewhere else in Buffalo. But they made it closer to the water for shipping. The second plant up in the line was what they called a standard plant. Again, it didn't have any metal stamping capabilities. But what it could do, it had fixtures for assembling the knockdown body parts. So they may get quarter panels and hoods and stuff like that. And they had fixtures that they put the bodies together. So they probably had fixtures for the different body styles. And these were just fixtures where they would put the components together, rivet the various sheet metal parts together. And then we've got the major plant that had full metal stamping capability. These stamps were humongous to stamp out the metal parts for the cars. Those plants were probably the Rouge, Kearney, New Jersey, and maybe ones in California. But they would ship out either the what they call the knockdown bodies that were assembled by the standard plants, or the more completed bodies. And these were painted with a primer color, and they call them bodies in white. Steve, I think your car today might represent a body in white. It was just a primer color. The paint was not finished. It was just a primer color.
And then it went to, from the body assembly plant to
Well, some of the plants had made their own bodies, like the Rouge.
Yeah.
Stamp it, put it together, and they may have shipped those bodies out in
assembly
either,
plants.
yeah, out to the other assembly plants in either the knockdown form or the body engine.
Were they all painted in the final assembly plants?
Beg your pardon?
Were they all painted in the finally assembled plants?
Yes.
Or were they shipped pre-painted?
Most of them were painted at the final assembly plant. There was a guy I think it was an architect by the name of Albert Kahn, who designed some of the assembly plants. And when he designed them, he had them multiple floors, and they would do the bodies up on the upper floors, paint them, and then they would be dropped down to the assembly line on the ground floor. Kevin?
He's a famous Detroit architect. But my question was, how long can you have an unpainted body before you start getting surface rust and stuff like that, I mean, you gotta get it moving.
Well, I don't know about the primer.
They were fine maybe before.
Those were the bodies in white, yes.
Oh, okay, he said.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yes. These kind of describe the plants, the Rouge plant in Michigan also had some other capabilities. They had a foundry there, and with the foundry, they could have cast, machine, and assemble all of the engines for US assembly. And some of the engines, completed engines, were shipped overseas to Europe. Some of them were the smaller horsepower engines, and they were prefixed with the letters AF. Most of the engines that were in our cars that we have today had either an A on them, and that was for a passenger car. They may have had double A on them, that would have been for the truck, and they may have had a heavy duty clutch in those engines. But those were all shipped out to the 32 assembly plants. And they had certain ways that they packed them on the rail cars so they could fit as many engines as possible. And I think they shipped them on end. They had boxes where they shipped them on end. I've seen some pictures of those.
I understand that Canada also had a foundry and they could make engines.
Yes, the Canadian ones were in the CA series. And then they added a third letter, and it's the top row of the keyboard, WERTY, yeah. The smaller horsepower engines, I think they used an AF on them. I think the United Kingdom had a horsepower tax. And the AF engines, I think they were 15 horsepower as opposed to 40.
Wow.
So it had a smaller bore on it.
Will you tell me when the?
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay.
Let's go to the next one. Well, that was mine. These red dots here represent where the assembly plants were located. And it kind of matches up with what's on the large map here. Well, you can see they're in the more populated areas of the country. The only problem I have with this is we've got an area here with no assembly plant. We've got an area here with no assembly plant. There is Fargo, which was a wholesale branch, but we don't think they did any assembly there.
Nobody lives there.
But they had the area. And like I said, each of these 32 plants had a letter code that they used on the assembly plant numbers. Let's go to the next one. After the articles that I wrote for the Model A News and the Restore, a guy up in Canada sent me an email and said, "Oh, I found that very interesting." He said, "I've got what I call a recap. It was a registry of Canadian-owned Model A's." And he said, "Would you like to have that?" I said, "Well, I wasn't concentrating on the Canadian plants, but send it to me and we'll see what we can do." So he sent me the listing, and it was a handwritten logs that he'd been maintaining. The Canadians had really 5 plants located here: Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, Vancouver. And from his information, we were able to get the letter code used by the Canadian plants. Not something that I wanted to do, but it was easy to do, and he appreciated it. The Windsor plant was like the Rouge plant for the US. It was the main plant. And they also provided cars to and parts to some of the other countries, Australia, New Zealand, and things like that. Let's go to the next one. We think that Ford required each of the assembly plants to send production records to Ford so they could find out how good they were doing or how bad they were doing. The Model A started production in, I think it was December 1927. These are the 1927 production figures that were found on the Model T production figures at the very bottom. There were only 2 plants that produced any cars in early or late 1927. Detroit, which is the Rouge plant, and Kearney, New Jersey. And you can see the body styles that they made and how many they made. Production was very, very low because they were doing a lot of learning. The other 30 assembly plants came online throughout 1928. And the last plants that came online were in September of 1928. They all didn't come online the same day. It was a gradual thing. Plus, they were still developing the Model A. They were making changes. They were going from forgings to stamped steel, which was cheaper. So that would increase production and lower costs on them. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the 1928 production log. You can see the assembly plants down the side here and the body types across the top. When I first saw this, Kearney, New Jersey here, why would they make 12,300 some odd Phaetons? Anybody got an answer?
Ship them south.
Huh?
Ship them to South America.
Exactly, exactly. Really. They made many more, I think 3 or 4 times more Phaetons in Kearney, New Jersey than they made at all the other assembly plants in 1928. I also have with me the 1929 production figures, the 1930 and 1931 production figures. So if you ever want to see and find out where your car was assembled, how many others were assembled there, let me know.
Dave, if I just have the number on the engine, that's the only number I've got.
Like I said, not all of them had the assembly plant number on them. Why, we don't know. But for some reason, they all weren't stamped. It could be that somebody previously either replaced that cross member, and I'll be getting into where these are located. Or somebody filled it in with body filler. To me, it's a no-no, but.
Okay. But you're talking about the number on the frame.
No, I'm talking about the number on the body, and I'll get into that where it is on the body. I'm gonna be talking about that next. Okay, go to the next one. This is my car many, many years ago. This is the towel section. The gas tank would be up in here. This is where your horizontal wooden floorboard would sit. Generally, where they appear is on this cross member here.
So that's not wood though.
That's not wood, that's all steel.
And that's right under the front seat.
It's gonna be just in front of the front seat, well, seat. Yeah, on my car, there's only a front seat other than the rumble seat.
Can you see it if you take the seat off or how? Where did you see
No, you don't have to. I'll get into that a little bit later. Neighbors stopped by, curious, what is that? And I would joke around with them a little bit and I say, I'm trying to crossbreed a Ford and a Sears.
Yes.
I told one guy it was a Soviet World War II missile launcher. But we had some fun with it. But the reason I took it down this far is back here, under the rear fender well, there was rust. So I wanted to get to that body side rail and get it repaired. Plus, I got it all sandblasted and nice and pretty and then primed. Let's go to the next one. This again is the rear cross member. This is a piece of tape I put on there. And you can see the number stamped in there. Not very visible, might be more visible here. This is the letter D, 000313. Again, I didn't know what it was, but in Art Filial's article, he had two other D0 numbers. One was on what he called an SPT coupe, which I thought would be a sport coupe. The other one was a special coupe. Mine's a special coupe. Now, I found out a little bit later that my special coupe, the gas tank date is, you can go to the next one. Try the next one. No. Just go back to the gas tank date, and Ford stamped most of the gas tanks starting in about April or May of 1928 with a date. And they did that up until about September of 1929. We think they did that because they had developed a seam welding process to weld the gas tanks together. And they wanted to test them to make sure that the seam welding process was good. It was holding, and it would hold gasoline. It actually was sitting on our knees when we drive the car. But they only date stamped them for that period of time. The date on my car is 7/11/28. July 11th of 1928. Supposedly, the special coupe came out on 10 July 1928, the day before the gas tank was stamped on my car. So that's why we think this number is so low, 313. It's the 313th special coupe that was made.
Excuse me just a second.
Sure.
Could somebody check on Perry Lynch? He's on camera and he hasn't moved in about 10 minutes.
He's probably at his house.
He looked like he's.
Yeah, we're looking at him on Zoom.
It could be frozen.
Okay,
He lost internet.
okay.
But his monitor is changing color, so.
Yeah, the TV screen in the background's moving.
Oh, okay.
Well, any tell us later?
Where was your car made at, Dave?
Good question. I don't know. Let me, I'll get to that in a minute. The frame number on my car is 211-730. Ford kept very good records on the engines. And I've got copies of the daily engine logs if anybody ever wants to see when your engine was made, what day it was made on. I've got copies and we can do that for you. 211-730 was made on 25 June 1928. A couple days before the gas tank was stamped on 7/11/1928. And that's the day after they started making this special coupe.
Harry did look like he wasn't there.
Hmm?
He didn't look good, did he? Harry. Back like that.
Looks like
Yeah, let's go to the next one. These are a couple other stamps. This is AXSTL. It's for you something. Many of you know Mike Greer, who used to be in the club. This was on his coupe. We don't know what the AX means, but the STL is for the St. Louis, Missouri plant. This one is S 2008, a relatively low number. That's on Ray Ray's 1928 two-door sedan, came out in June. Over here on this here, I've listed all 35 because they moved some of them with the letter code, the ones we have equated. And we've got most of the assembly plants equated to the letter codes that are used. Again, 1 to 5 characters. It would appear anywhere on that cross member. And we're still looking for the Milwaukee, Wisconsin plant. We're still looking for the Buffalo, New York plant. And I'm not sure about the Rouge plant. I think they use the letter F for the Rouge plant. I've got a whole slew of letter codes with the letter R. Whether that's Rouge or not, I don't know. R was also used on the Richmond, California plant when it moved. But those numbers are relatively low because it was a new production. Some of the assembly plants that were moved, they changed the letter code. Others did not. Let's go to the next one. In collecting these numbers, we found that there were a series of letters like my car that had what I called leading zeros in it. D000313. There were actually 3 different letter codes that had them. They were all on 1928 and early 1929 coupe bodies. And when I talk about coupe bodies, I'm talking about the standard coupe, which I think is the 45A, the sport coupe that was also introduced at start of production. And I've got that written down here with that. Yeah, I'll see it right now. The letter B was used on the sport coupes. The letter C was used on the business coupes that were introduced in May of 1928. And the D was used on the special coupe, like mine. It was introduced on 10 July 1928. They all had leading zeros in them, like mine did. So it really didn't, and I couldn't equate any of these to a specific assembly plant. And I got to reading a book that's not online. It's The Ford Factory by Lawrence Sorensen. It's what they call a coffee table book. It's this one here. And this is a page extracted. I think it's on page 50.
40.
Yeah. Pass that around. Anyway, what it says here is Ford went to outside sources to provide some of the parts for the Model A. Prior to the Model T, Ford was making most of the parts themselves. But they went to outside resources for things like wheels. Kelsey Hayes was another company that made wheels for Ford. It also talks about that Ford was having problems with metal stamping capabilities, doing some of the deep draws, like the rear fenders being one of them. They had stuck with the Model T since 1908, so they really didn't keep abreast of the latest metal stamping capabilities. And they were having big problems when they designed the Model A and metal stamping. So what it says is they went to Briggs Body Company, contracted with them. The Briggs made all of the coupe bodies, the B, the C, the D, and probably the A. They did that in 1927. They did that in all of 1928 and into early 1929. So Briggs, if you own one of those in that period, it's probably very likely made by Briggs. Now, we've seen some of those that don't have a number on them, and we don't know if those were bodies that were the knockdown bodies that Briggs was supplying to the assembly plants to put together, or if it was in the bodies in white, but it probably was one or the other. But we have seen a good number of them that are not stamped. If anybody would like to borrow this book, and you don't have anything to do for the next couple of days, it's good reading.
Next slide.
Did they build any of the cars complete at the Rouge plant?
Yes, yeah. So they would do the engines there, they would do the bodies there, and they would assemble the cars there, yes. The letter code that we've got equated for the Rouge plant is F. And like I said, I don't know about the R numbers that I don't have equated. There's a whole bunch of them.
Dave, can I borrow that? Will you hear?
Sure.
Just got a relative down, Bill met him before. I met there from Michigan, and he was the architect, or not, draftsman rather, and he would design, like when the doors would come out, anything new, he would have to design a machine to grab it and bring it to it there.
Mhm.
And his brother-in-law is an architect who built the main Ford building up there a few years ago.
Yeah.
So he's coming down, he'll like that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I bought this one off of Amazon. You can get them on Amazon. It's out of print. I think Lawrence Sorensen has passed away. Very good reading. It's not on the internet though. So they say you can find anything on the internet, but not true. Let's go to the next one, please. These are the key extracts from the highlighted areas that were on that previous. And these are some of the things that were in those highlighted areas. I wanted to try and find out when Briggs stopped making the bodies for the Model A assembly. Did find out that Briggs also was under contract with Ford to make the cabriolet bodies, but they didn't come online until March of 1928. It might be just coincidence, but I found that to be a key time frame because I think Briggs stopped making the bodies for Model A for Ford around that time frame. So it could be that they stopped making the standard coupe, the sport, the business coupe, and the special coupe around that same time frame. You go to the next one. This is kind of a recap. of the, what I call the ABCD cars. I tried to chase down the standard coupe, because I didn't have any of those reported. But it seems to fit in line with the B, C, and D. Since they were all coupes, they all had leading zeros. Some of you know Gary Carr. He restored a Fine Point early 28 coupe. His car does not have a number on it. Dave Sella, who, when he was alive in Michigan, he restored a car. I tracked down the new owner, which was kind of a strange guy. I had to call him before 6 o'clock in the morning because he didn't like getting a lot of spam. I got up earlier than I normally do, called him.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm doing research on this. Would you mind checking your car? He said, sure. I don't think he ever did. But anyway, I tried to track down to, I'm probably going to be doing some more articles for the Restorer and the Model A News. I would like to confirm the letter A on those standard coupes up until the time frame that they switched over to the special coupe. Like I said, they all have leading zeros on them, unique to just the Briggs build bodies. Interesting, I found in another book, the business coupe, which is the one that's got the either the solid rear window or it's got the oval, what they call the opera window in 1929. The few that I had of those were very high numbers. If they started production, I think they started on 5 May of 1928. The numbers were very high. There's another book here called the Coupe Book. It's put out by Mafka. The answer was in here. The sport coupe and the business coupe bodies in their raw form are essentially the same. So what they did is they lumped the numbers together. They still had a different letter for them, but they lumped the numbers together. And that's, I think I've got it highlighted in there. Here goes the next one. I wanted to try and find out exactly when, and exactly when is kind of vague, but on this slide here, these are the numbers. The latest one that I accumulated from soliciting numbers from Model A owners, 77,479. And that was March of 1929. Like I said, these are production numbers. So we know that Briggs made at least 77,479 special coupes. If you try and find out how many special coupes were made, you won't find any record of that, because Ford lumped them in with the standard coupe it replaced in July of 1928. So I said, well, I can do something with this. 10 July, and I used the date of 1 May. And I divided the number of days between those two times, and I come up with 263 special coupe bodies per day. So now I had to run that out to sometime in July. We didn't know whether they stopped making a special coupe on 1 July or 31 July. So I worked it out to both of them. We know that the last one that I had recovered was 77,479. So if they stopped on 1st of July, the total would have been 93,522 special coupes. If they ran it out to the end of July, it made 101,675. special coops.
Is that just for the United States?
Yes. I don't think Briggs sent any of the bodies anywhere else, overseas or anywhere else. I don't think Canada made any special coops at all.
Do you know how many Model A's total were built in 29 roughly?
It's gonna be on the bottom of that annual production log. That, no, I got it in here, I think. We might have to do some adding, Don, but
That was the biggest year.
anybody wants to see Henry Ford's driver's license? At the bottom, they're gonna have,
138 pounds, that's all he weighed,
yeah, he was a skinny dude. Worked so hard.
just nasty.
At the bottom of the log here, it tells how many Phaetons, Roadsters, and so on. So you'd have to add all those up. That's for 1929. This was probably something I didn't have to do, but I had a few spare minutes when I wasn't sleeping and this NK is Hunter Fanny's special coupe that he had judged. It came out of Norfolk, Virginia, and had number 760 on it. And when he gave me that, I wondered why the number was so low. Because that's about the time that Briggs stopped making them, the bodies. And at least Norfolk took over.
Just roughly come to like a half a million. I can't be right. Half a million is what I just kind of played
Well,
with.
I can tell you how many engines they made in the 4 over years. 5 million is the figure that they threw.
For all
away.
4 years.
Yeah. Well, they actually,
29, so that
they
was
actually
maybe half
made-
million's right.
yeah, they actually made engines into 1930 after Model A production ended.
Mhm.
So,
I think 29, they made like 1.5 million. They made a lot of cars.
yeah, 1929 and 1930 were the high production years. If you take a look at our club roster, 28 low production, 31 low production, 28 and 29 are high production. And so,
Did they not sell the towing to Russia or something like that when they got finished?
well, they actually sold it before Model A production ended here in the States. They were making it under GAZ, G-A-Z. They were making engines. Some guys have GAZ engines. Carburetors, I don't know if Norm's got any GAZ carburetors, but no. I think Jim Gregory had one. So let's go to the next one. This is just kind of an individual of what we got over here. Most of these letter codes came from the city where the plant was located. Atlanta used AA, the first and last letter. Charlotte, first and last letter. Chester, first and last. Chicago, CHI. Those were the easy ones to equate, where they used some letters from the assembly plant. Get down to Columbus, Ohio. Why did they use the letter G? Beats me, I never found out and probably never will. But that's what they used. Those were the tough ones to equate. Most of the rest of them. Go down to the next one, Miguel. Like I said, I don't have Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Norfolk, Virginia was NK. Go to the next one, please. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This was a unique one. It wasn't. They used P. We didn't know that initially, but we later found out that it was. They used the P for the 1928 and 1929 cars. And then we were seeing cars that had the body style indicator, 45A, 55A, 55B. I was at a car show up in Frederick, Francis Scott Key, used to have a very nice car show. And I was talking to a guy who had a 30 coupe. And I got to talking to him, he said, my car's been in my family, my father owned it. Oh, nice. I said, do you know where it came from? He said, yes. Came from Pittsburgh. I said, is there the same production number on it? He said, a what? So we looked at it. And it had 45A on it. We assume that these body style indicators came out in 1927. Now, this proves that they weren't made up until 1930. Otherwise, Pittsburgh would have used it on the very 28, 29 cars. So those body style indicators were not around in 1927, 1928, or 1929. Omaha, Nebraska, AU. What this requires is somebody with a car with a number on it who knows the total history. It used to be you could get the history of a car by going to the Motor Vehicle Administration. Can't do that anymore because of privacy. So I think what I'm going to do before I take my dirt bath is do another article for the Model A News and key on just exactly what I'm looking for. The information that the Briggs Company made the coupe bodies for 1927, 28, and early into 29 is not in the judging scanners. Briggs also made some of the 30 and 31 coupe bodies. And those had a body tag on them. For the next one. These are the things that I still would like to find out. The 1927 or early 28. I'd like to find one car that's got the letter A in it. Joe Candella's car. It's March 1928. Got the letters AF on it. I've got two other cars with the letter AF on it. I don't know what it means.
They were both two doors, right? All three of them are.
All three of them are two doors, correct? And they're early two doors. They're all
Correct. They're all.
When you came over, when I first bought my truck, you come over and looked at it and you said something about the body was a roadster or something like that. Where did you get that number at? Because you didn't take it apart.
It was found where I pointed it out.
On that thing there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a B0, which
What?
means which means that body was a sport coupe that somebody converted into your truck.
Okay.
And that's why I started calling it, I think, a Franken truck.
Yeah.
So somebody had put together a sport coupe body with a bed on the back.
I think it's called mismatched parts.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
one of a kind.
That's it.
Like I said, I'm still looking for Milwaukee, Buffalo, and the letter codes for the Michigan, Rouge, Michigan plant. Got several cars that just have a digital portion on them. Unless we find a guy who knows the history of the car. Could be Milwaukee, could be Buffalo, don't know.
I know on the workday weekend, you looked at my car, my 28 Roadster. What did you find?
Zero, nothing,
Nothing there at all.
but
I know it had a D code on the firewall. She showed me that. I was busy doing 10 other things at the same time.
Yeah. Like I said, the date codes were on the gas tank starting in April or May of 28.
Yeah.
Up to September 29. Now, I don't like to scrape paint on anybody's car, and I won't do it other than my car.
Yeah.
But if you ever sandblast that and you find something in there, let me know.
I have one piece of potentially contradictory information. Even the last 1927 four-door sedan Model T that was produced was an outside manufacturer body. It's quoted in that book, but that's an incorrect statement. Ford never made all 100% any of the Model T bodies. So the fact that he was buying them outside was, yes, he made almost all of them. You can tell the difference between an outside T body and an inside made T body. Once it got to the 20s, and the wood went away, all of those are Ford bodies, the two-door sedan and the coupes, the roadsters, the tourings are all Ford bodies. But he had to go back, when he went to the A's, he was too busy, he had to go back to buying more bodies. But he never made his own four-door sedan, they were all outside manufacturers.
Well, I don't think he made any of the Model A four doors either.
No, I don't think so.
Briggs or Murray did that.
Yeah.
There were some differences in the Briggs and the Murray up until 1931, and Ford said, I want these parts to be interchangeable, so they made them nearly the same,
Yeah.
but not entirely.
Yeah.
The Murray bodies used, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the fixed fasteners that are called D nuts. They're pressed in. They were used by Briggs. Murray used what were called caged nuts, where nuts were actually wrapped around with sheet metal. And Murray used Steve's Deluxe Delivery is made by Murray because it's got caged nuts in certain areas.
Yeah, the Ford had a problem. He couldn't make all his parts fast enough, so he had to buy some. Depending on the year and his production needs, he had to buy more or less.
Yeah, like I said, capabilities they didn't have during the early years of.
Yeah.
And,
They have an attitude problem.
I want to thank Joe Candela for putting this together. He's a magic magician with computers that I am not. Hopefully this is being taped and it's going to be available on the Vintage Ford Forum. Anybody have any questions? Answers?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Let Ray know how to do it.
Huh?
I'll let Ray know how to do it.
I'm afraid of that. No, I used his car.